All right, let's begin with last night's vice presidential debate between Vice President Mike Pence and Joe Biden's running mate Kamala Harris, senator from California. Expectations were very high for Kamala Harris. Her experience as a prosecutor and certainly her performances during testimony in the Senate have been elements of why expectations were very high for how she would do. And she did well. And I believe that she won the debate to the extent that there was a winner. But I do think that she was not nearly as tough on Mike Pence as she was on Joe Biden during Democratic primary debates. I think there were missed opportunities, but I'm going to say more about that in a little bit. But the big picture here, if we don't want to miss the forest for the trees. And the big picture is that Kamala Harris did well on everything coronavirus related. She did okay on economic issues, and she was sort of so-so on some other topics, which we will discuss. But if you ask me, what will the impact of this debate be on the election? I believe that it is almost zero. It's not zero, but it's very, very close to zero, because with everything going on, with Donald Trump behind in the polls, Donald Trump releasing videos from the White House in which he really doesn't look good, which we will talk about, nothing happened in this debate that will change the polling very much. And that's not good for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, because if you believe the polling is even roughly accurate, they need something to put them back in the lead. And the most likely scenario is that in the next 72, 48, 24, in the next 5 minutes, some new scandal will pop up and the vice presidential debate will be all but forgotten. But let's look at a few moments from it. First of all, the fact that there even was plexiglass installed at the last minute between the candidates, that's not good for Mike Pence. The plexiglass being needed is a topic that in and of itself is an indictment of the Trump-Pence handling of coronavirus. And indeed, they went right into coronavirus. It was the first question. I actually think this was Kamala Harris's best moment of the entire debate, coming right at the beginning.
Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the vice president and the president were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine?
So this was Kamala's best moment. If you watched only the first question or only the first 10-minute segment, which was on coronavirus, and then you bailed on the debate, you would come away with the best possible impression of how it went for Kamala Harris. The rest of the debate was more mixed because Mike Pence kept going over his time, sometimes by as much as a minute. The moderator was unable to get him under control. Mike Pence would continually avoid answering the actual question being discussed by going back and answering the previous question or going 2 questions back. At one point, it got so bad, I wondered if Pence was going to ask to spend some time on questions from his 2016 debate with Tim Kaine. He just wanted to set the agenda himself, and combining that with the kind of calm, arrogant delivery that Pence is known for, I think certainly he came up looking good enough that his base is not going to say, I can no longer support Trump-Pence because of Pence. Whether any undecideds were convinced to the extent that they still remain, much less clear. Here's an example of Pence doing this. Pence asked, why does the U.S. have a much higher death rate than just about every other country? Mike Pence just talks about something else.
Higher than that of almost every other wealthy country. And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China.
So I'll spare you the torture, but he did about 2 minutes of that without actually answering why does the United States have one of the highest death rates per capita in the world from coronavirus. In another moment, Mike Pence was asked about that super spreader event that they held at the White House, not this past Saturday, but the previous one, the nomination party for Amy Coney Barrett. And of course, we know that that event was at least partially responsible for multiple instances, multiple cases of coronavirus related to the White House. Watch Pence just bail out.
To speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic.
So that is not Pence building to some kind of clear answer about the super spreader event at the White House. That's Pence ranting and raving about other things. And that was the entire debate. Here's an example of Mike Pence apparently realizing that the coronavirus portion of the debate at the beginning did not go well for him. Here is Pence asked about presidential health and age and disability. And Mike Pence just says, well, I'm going to keep talking about coronavirus.
Had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on to the issue
but I would like to go back because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time.
That was the whole debate. I won't give you more examples of that. Mike Pence also did some of his normal theatrics, which include refusing to accept the science on climate change, repeating Donald Trump's talking point about how forest fires could be solved by forest management, which they claim Democrats are either against or aren't doing. And then maybe the most bizarre moment of the debate was when a fly landed on Mike Pence's head and stayed there for minutes. And the fly landing on Mike Pence's head was funny to start with, but the fact that it seemed to be stuck in Mike Pence's hair gel was even funnier. And that instantly became a viral moment. The Joe Biden campaign immediately starting to sell fly swatters, and many allegories made to the biblical meaning of when a fly lands on you. For those more religious folks in the audience, it's ominous. It's not good. But the moment that many say was Kamala Harris's worst of the debate was when the topic of packing the courts came up. Now, the question came up during the Biden-Trump debate last week. And the question is, if Joe Biden is elected and Republicans confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, will Joe Biden pack the Supreme Court, meaning add seats to the Supreme Court? And Kamala Harris, much like Joe Biden, did not give a yes or no answer. And there's a lot of people who are saying it looks really bad for Kamala not to answer the question. I'm not so sure. Let me explain. There clearly has been a strategic decision made by the Biden campaign not to answer yes or no about whether Joe Biden would pack the court. I don't think court packing is a voting issue for many people. So really, there's a lot of potential downside to giving a straight answer. And I'll explain what I mean. If they say yes or no, they, number one, make the answer the focus rather than the threat of using this in the future. And if you answer yes or no, the unknown threat of maybe Biden will pack the court goes away. And so I understand the risk when you decide you're not going to answer a question. There's a risk that you're going to appear evasive. But I understand the strategy because I don't think there's much to gain by saying definitively yes or no. If Biden and Harris say yes, if Amy Coney Barrett gets confirmed, we will pack the court. The right and those on the left who don't want the court packed will go crazy. And that becomes the focus rather than Republican hypocrisy about confirming Amy Coney Barrett with just days left before an election. If Biden and Harris say we won't pack the court, they bail out the GOP. And they're basically saying, even if you confirm Amy Coney Barrett, don't worry, we're not going to pack the court. So while I accept that Harris didn't answer, I actually understand why. And it will be a question as to whether it works or doesn't work. But I get the strategy. Mike Pence also during the debate seemed to have a fat lip, and his left eye was either bloody with a burst blood vessel or with pink eye, which can sometimes happen with coronavirus. So it was impossible not to notice his physical appearance during the debate. It was bizarre. But big picture, the debate was not a nothing burger. I think that you saw how, when Kamala Harris went after Joe Biden in the primary, you imagined there would be more ferocity and energy from her against Mike Pence. And I took live calls last night after the debate, and a bunch of my callers said, sometimes when women are assertive or aggressive in popular culture, it counts against them. The Martha Stewart effect, as it's sometimes been described. And I think that that is absolutely true to a degree. I still would have liked to see a balanced approach that had Kamala Harris more on the offensive, which we know she can do. We've seen her do it in the Senate. We've seen her do it in other contexts. But the big picture is I don't think the debate is going to change a thing. And when the polling is looking so bad for Trump and Pence, with now only 25 days left until this election, they need something to turn it around. And this debate is not going to be the thing that does it. A lot of the shirts you see me wearing on YouTube are actually made by a company called Teddy Stratford. I love these shirts, and that's why I asked them to be a sponsor of the show. It really is the most innovative shirt you can buy because most slim fit button-up shirts give you this weird stretched out gap in the chest where the buttons are. You don't get that with the Teddy Stratford shirts because all of their shirts come with a patented zipper hidden beneath the buttons, which prevents the chest from stretching apart like that. But most importantly, just overall, it makes the shirt fit much better and look better. The carefully designed shirt is also cut in a way that improves the look of your upper body physique. It has a really nice, elegant, close fit that other shirts don't really give you. It also has a specially designed collar that won't fall down and lay flat, which I love. The difference all around with these shirts really is noticeable. Go check them out at davidpakman.com/Teddy. The link is down below and they'll give you 15% off your first order if you use the coupon code Pakman at checkout.